We've talked so much about what you've gone through, and yet what I see at the end of this story is such a story of redemption. And of course, it happened as you were celebrating resurrection, interestingly enough. And I think your story is so empowering. It gives so much courage because, we talk about survival stories and none of them are pretty. They're all tough. Mine is, hers is, they're messy. They're awful. And everybody's got one in some way or another. But for me, and I think for us in this platform, is regardless of how horrible and how deep it is, there is always hope. There is something to hold on to. There is a tether that will pull you back out and to look for it just like you did.
Yeah.
Let's take a pause.
So you received this text back from him, and that gets that sparkle back, right? You start chanting. How did you get from that point to reconnecting with your husband, reconnecting with the church, going back to the parish?
I started to realize some things. I started to realize how important the church was for me. And I started talking to the Hubs about it. And he felt heard, I think, by it. And I felt heard. And he started saying, you need to come back. You need to come back. You don't have to talk to anybody. You can go up to the chant stand and leave out the side door, which I did, which I still do. And he said, but you need to come back. So I started going back, a little bit at a time, but I started going back. And then I started realizing some things about him. And I started giving him more of the benefit of the doubt and listening more to what the experience was like for him. And I started appreciating him more because throughout the time that we were separated, he did a lot of work. He did a lot of therapy. And he stepped up to the plate more than he had in the past. He was making more time for us as a family when we were separated than he had before. Mm-hmm. So it was like he was making so much effort that I couldn't ignore that. So all of a sudden I sort of found myself going, I want this back. I want this man. I miss this. I miss him. So
I love that, because you were able to then separate the pain that all that created for both of you and just pay attention on this, you and him, and the relationship.
Yeah. We went on a vacation. We went, of all places, to Disney World.
I knew you were going to say that.
We love Disney World. We're kind of dorks,
World.
But we love it. We go fairly frequently now. But we went to Disney World. We took John, and it was like we were able to get away from everything, and we came back, and I just kind of didn't leave. I stayed at the house, and that was kind of it.
So Mari, I sort of asked this earlier, and then we were looking at it before. So much had happened in your life. Tell me now, all these years later, where you place all this. What do you do with all of this that has happened in your world?
I think for a lot of trauma survivors, what I experience as a therapist is most helpful for them in the end is paying it forward. Kind of like this. Mm-hmm. It's to do something that helps other people who have been through trauma.
Absolutely. That's entirely the underpinning of this show.
Exactly.
It's the only reason I would be this vulnerable in public is to say,
right,
if my horrible, sad story could help another, I'm willing to get that vulnerable. And that's exactly
Right.
what you're doing.
Yes, and I've
So-
always say, like, when you share your pain, it loses the power that it has over you,
Right.
and empowers the next person.
Right.
Right.
So for me, before these particular things that we've talked about happened, there was plenty of trauma before that. So I channeled it into becoming a therapist. Now, as a therapist, you have to be really careful to make sure that you yourself are in therapy. I always tell people, if you see a therapist that's not in therapy, run, personally, or at least hasn't recently been in therapy. Because otherwise you end up working your own stuff out on your client. You have to be able to make a very clear distinction about, okay, this is mine, this is theirs. So I did a lot of that work. I still do a lot of that work. But what it allows me is a deeper sense of understanding and empathy for what my clients go through. My trauma spans just about every area of life you can think of. I mean, losing people to violence, domestic violence, with other people in my life, financial trauma, legal trauma for people that I'm close to and having had to deal with that. I mean, you name it, like in everything, medical, car accidents, everything you can possibly think of. And so as a result, when a client starts telling me about their trauma, I'm not going to say to them, oh yeah, I've been through this too. Instead, what I'm able to do is to relate to them inside me. And so I can say, I don't know what you're going through. I don't know what this experience has been like for you. I'm imagining that you're probably feeling betrayed, that you're feeling like you haven't been chosen, that you're feeling like you've been left behind. And I can fill in those spaces because I felt those things so deeply with whatever my experience was that was somehow similar.
Right.
And, everybody is able to empathize. For me, I think I feel it very deeply and profoundly when I'm able to empathize as a result.
Well, and I love the point about, paying it forward.
Yeah. So that's what paying it forward feels like for me, is that I'm able to internally draw from my experiences to try and understand more. I'm able to access my pain within myself to try and feel a little bit of what they're feeling.
I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So, let your soul talk.
Okay.
What does that sound like?
Okay. This particular hymn is very dear to my heart. Our whole group of friends at the seminary when I was in school, we would go places like for dinner, and there would be 15, 20 of us, and we would stand around the table and we would chant this hymn all together. I miss these days, 20 years ago. And the whole restaurant would stop and listen to us chanting as a group. And it was so prayerful and so moving for us. We didn't do it because people would stop, It was just our way of praying and blessing the food. But we called it the school fight song because it's the hymn of the Holy Cross, and that was our school name. So son Kyrie ton launsu, kevloison tin klironomiansu, ni castis vasilevsin, katavarvaron dorumenos, keton son filaton, diatus stavrus supolitevma.
so beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tough story. So much vulnerability. So much honesty. You paid it forward.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to.
Thank you, Mari.
Appreciate you
Really
both.
appreciate you.